All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. I'm gonna have to yell because we don't have speakers in here, but the room's small enough. I think hopefully you guys can hear me. Jessica, can you guys hear me in the back?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, well, thank you so much for coming. I am going to run through a presentation here tonight. We're going to do a exercise that's on the table before you. We're going to have a Q&A session, a discussion, and hopefully have some fun in the process. We are in the learning process still. This is really the beginning in a lot of ways for us, because up until this point, we've just been researching and doing some things of background information, learning about things. But now we're actually going to start really getting to work. So go through a couple introductions. So I'm Brian Wright. I'm the principal of Town Planning and Urban Design Collaborative. And we are leading the charge for all of you to help you figure out how to update the zoning ordinance, the unified zoning ordinance. So I've got a team of people here with me. They're sprinkled around throughout. You saw some of them when you came in, and but we have people who specialize in zoning. Obviously, land use attorney Claire up here in the front, our project manager, so you'll see her a lot. Jarrett's co-managing with her. He's in the back. Jessica's one of our directors and designers, and as a planner in the back as well. Emily's our chief logistician and coordinator. And we have a few more that will be coming over the next couple of days to do some other things with us. But basically, we've brought our shop to you, so you don't have to come to us. So came from Franklin, Tennessee, though. If you've been in Franklin, not too far away, it was great. Actually, we're able to drive here, on an airplane, because as you see, a lot of our projects are sprinkled around the country, and that's good because we get to see a lot of things that are working well for communities, and things that aren't working so well, so we can bring lessons learned back and share those ideas and thoughts. But this national experience is great, but we're not from here, so we can never know this place like the community, right? And so we really count on the locals to be part of the team, to be the experts. So hopefully, as we go through, we have a few people who are online via Zoom, but I see lots of people who are from the city and county here, but not as many just average citizens. So I have a few non-related people that are not okay. There we go. All right. Yes, you win the door prize. Yeah. Okay, right. So, but anyway, it's a little hard to get people to come out to talk about zoning. It's not the most sexy subject ever. And you guys have a wonderful city with lots of things to do, so it's hard to compete with that. Some places we go, we're like the only show in town, and so it's standing room only. They're like, oh my gosh, can we talk about zoning, please? Because our town's terrible and there's nothing else to do. So y'all don't have that problem. But we don't have any preconceived notions because we don't know, what it's supposed to be, since we're not from here. So we can really just come into it with an open mind. Now, I love this picture and I always show it, and it's really important for the citizens. So for you, and for those of you at home on Zoom, and hopefully those who will join us throughout this process. But if you can see, it's a little bit bright on the picture, but there's something going on here in the picture. Are they coming in for a landing, or are they crashing, right? You don't know because you can't see their face. A lot of times when we do a process like this, when we're writing a new zoning ordinance or a comprehensive plan, or any of the things that we do for cities and towns around the country, people get a lot of anxiety about it. What's going on, what's going to happen. And so I always say, like, when you get on an airplane, you only need to know a few things. Where are you trying to go, right? What's your destination? What time's your flight? What seat you're sitting in, and most importantly, probably where's the bathroom? And what you don't have to know is how to fly the plane. You don't pull out that seat back card and it's the instruction manual for the airplane. It's just like, if this happens, make sure you get out of here in time. But so what I always try to tell people is, as we're opening up this and saying, like, hey, what do we need to do to improve the zoning in the future? People don't need to feel like they have to become an expert on zoning, right? And people tend to do so. They think, well, if I don't know everything about zoning, then I'm not going to give good input. So that's my encouragement to the community. So as you're engaging and talking to people throughout the process that are in the general public, just make sure that you convey that idea to them. So a little bit about zoning. starting with a comprehensive plan, zooming out a little bit, comp plan, you have actually a really good one. Unlike a lot of places we go, it's either way out of date or it's new and it's bad. And so you guys don't have that issue. But in general, if you don't know, a comp plan is a long-range policy document that really establishes the vision for the future of the city and county, has guidance for policies, how to grow, where to grow, et cetera, and has specific action items to accomplish that vision for the future. You guys have some specific goals in there, focus on livability, mobility, economic vitality, and preservation. So those are all good. And one of the recommendations in there is to make provisions to the Unified Development Code to support the goals and policies of the comp plan. And so that is what we're doing here. So we are moving that forward. A lot of places we go to have a really bad comp plan, we have to kind of like sort of do a whole vision, like what do you want to be in the future? Where do you want to grow? How do you want to grow all that? Because you'll have that when using that as a given. We're starting it with the comp plan as instructions for the future. There may be some things that have, transpired in the past couple of years since you did the comp plan that, we may say, well, yeah, I know it says that, but, we might need to think about this a little differently as we're in the zoning, but it needs to be in keeping with the comprehensive plan. We can't just sort of start over, right? So that's what we're focusing on as we go through this. So we've heard some things so far, talking about connecting the policy to the code. So ideas about consolidating, updating, streamlining the code so it's user-friendly and tailored to meet the local needs. Protecting agricultural areas, natural resources, forestry areas, wildlife habitats, and water bodies. Providing zoning focus on character, context, high quality development, with intentional built results, right? Not just that anything goes kind of idea. And so when you have a place like you do currently, there are some areas that are really wonderful, that are those postcard, the pictures that you photograph, you put in your marketing materials and all that. And those places were built and with an intention in mind, right? And since then, people have built in different ways that didn't really necessarily focus on what was going to come out the other end of the development process. So also looking at ensuring context responsive infill, limiting development in areas not served by public infrastructure, encouraging a variety of housing types and densities that are suitable for a wide range of price points. So there's something for everyone, no matter what stage of life you're in or what your income level is. Creating attractive gateways into key areas of Rome County, and then utilizing the concept of character areas to inform development regulations. So just to boil it down even further, zoning really implements the vision of the comprehensive plan. It groups land into different areas or zones. There are rules within those zones that talk about what you can build and what you can do in each of those zones. But one of the things we always try to get across is that the zoning, like what we do in this process, doesn't cause anything to be built. A lot of times people get concerned in the community, like, oh, well, if we say we want this to happen here, or that to happen there, that now it's going to happen. And really, it depends on the market. It depends on the property owner to do whatever it is they want to do within the zoning when they want to do it. And so you have these future land use areas in the comprehensive plan. Currently, there's the county and then within the city, and it's broken down into character areas, and that's what I just mentioned, character. And so the zoning ordinance will focus on this idea of character as the predominant organizing structure. So right now you have conservation areas, rural areas, town center character areas, urban character areas, and urban growth character areas, as well as a gateway corridor and rural commercial corridor. And so these we're sort of boiling down and looking more into what is that character that is intended in there. So the comprehensive plan talks about it. There's some intent, there's some high level discussion about it. There's even a few pictures, but part of this process is going to be to really distill in a meaningful way what the elements, what's the DNA of each of these different character areas that will then show up in the zoning. Just to clarify as well, we aren't doing anything for Cave Springs zoning. They are doing their own zoning, so if you know something about that. So if you haven't spent much time studying your current comprehensive plan, here are some of those pages that talk about the character, and I would recommend that you go and take a look at that. Some nice ideas here as well. So furthermore, exploring what is zoning. So zoning can give you places like this, and you see around here, but it can also give you places like this. I've yet to go to a community who said we want more of this. Most communities we go to have this. It might be not this exuberant of an example of this, but they have it to some extent or another, and they tend to not really love it. It's not the most beloved part of their city, and they tend to, except for when you look at the finances of the city, there's a positive impact a lot of times from these places. But when you start to look at this picture is getting a little dated because if I understand, there's not any Circuit City anymore, right? And so even though at some time somebody said, "Oh my gosh, we got Circuit City," yes, we've always wanted one of those, and let's roll out the red carpet for you, and give you some incentives and all that. And now they're gone. But we have their box left, the building that they went in, and now we're trying to figure out what to do with it. So those are the kinds of things to think about moving forward. Now, many cities that we go to, we see these kinds of articles in the newspaper, stop sign for development, and not here, not now, not ever, not in my backyard, and all of the things. And we see this before even any proposal has come forth, right? Just a sign on the land or a whiff in the air of this new development might come, and people are just instantly hating it. Why is that? Used to, people had a different idea about development. This is a statue of a guy, and you see in his hand, these are blueprints. This is a developer. He's the founder of what is now its own municipality, a place called Coral Gables. So he was a developer and had a vision for it, and now it's wonderful. They built a statue because they like them so much. You don't see developers get statues too often these days, right? So one of the half of our projects are private development projects. So I always show this to our clients and say, my goal for you is to get you a statue. It's such a good job, not because you need one, but we want to just bring back developers' credibility in the world. And so
that's been a while.
Yeah, right. So when we talk to people around the country, we say, "Hey, what do you want? What do you want your town or city to be like?" They say, "Oh, no, Mayberry. I love Mayberry." And so I went and I found this picture. This is actually Mayberry. This is the back lot where they shot Andy Griffith show. And so the thing that you see is that it's actually just any small town. It's a great little layout there. It's a quintessential Americana kind of town. Now, this is what people mostly get. Even though they've asked for Mayberry, this is what's delivered, and has been for a long time. Kind of after World War II, this is what we started doing. I don't even know where this neighborhood is. It could be anywhere. I don't think it's here, but it could be, maybe. And what's the difference in this house and that house or that house, and why do these roads not connect? They come so close, yet so far away. So that's the residential version. Now here's the commercial, and this idea of where are we in the world. This is called this Anywhere USA, and I need to find a better picture that doesn't have palm trees, because this at least limits it to certain areas, right? It couldn't be anywhere, but it's man. This is really a rough place to be. Now, here's a much better version, more flattering. They've cut the grass at least. It's not going back to nature. Now, if you can see here, Beautification Award. Somehow Burger King outdid McDonald's or Express Oil Change or they have the nicest bed of pansies here. I'm not sure what they did to get that, and if there was a large committee that voted on that. But if we're giving out awards for this type of place, we may have set our bar way too low, right? Maybe we don't have to like hate on it, but maybe we just don't say anything rather than giving awards. You know? So now the thing is that it's not a sinister plot to homogenize America by evildoers. It's what the zoning delivers. It's what the zoning requires. All of these pictures that I've shown that we've gotten a kick out of have been following the rules in most cities and towns. And so the zoning for the longest time could not get past the idea of uses, separating one use from the next. And so you separate everything. Shopping pods here, you have office pods there, you've got a school pod, and this, my joke is that this is not a prison, even though it looks like it could be. Some barbed wire around there. Here's one of these, different neighborhood, but looks kind of like the last one. So a single family pod of residential. Here's a multi-family version. We call this the train wreck layout, where all the cars of the train just kind of went everywhere. And so that's, we hear so often in communities like, we need more multi-family, oh my God. And if this is what's getting delivered, like I get it, right? I understand what people say, because what they're talking about is they don't want an apartment complex so often. And then I always ask, like, who here has never lived in an apartment? Oh. Right? No one raises their hand, because everyone lived in an apartment at some point in their life. It serves a need, right? And a lot of people prefer it. Maybe not if it's just this, so the other thing that happens is when you're separating all these uses, these pods, every now and then it's two different pods of different uses. Sometimes they're next to each other. Oh my God. What do? Buffer. Just buffer the heck out of it, right? And so we pick up a zoning ordinance, and the zoning ordinance will have one of the most elaborate sections of the ordinance will be the buffers. Pages and pages and pages talking about what types and how many, and the density and the opacity of the number of leaves on each branch. And, and so here, it wasn't enough to just have vegetative buffer. They actually have a fence too, right? Because, oh my gosh, who knows, if you live here and you actually saw the back of this strip center, you're going to turn to stone, right? And what actually happens in real life is people find a way. They cut a hole in the fence. They climb the fence. They want to go here, and they're like, I'm not getting in my car and driving out here and getting on the highway and clogging it up and coming on the arterial and now going here when I could have walked 20 seconds, right? And so our buffer standard to protect them from the hideousness of it actually kept them from being able to walk to it as well. And so that's what happens with buffers. Now, this is the way that people used to build towns. Thing that's great is you have big civic space here, there's a civic use, there's commercial on the ground floor, people live above. You want to be in the heart of the action, right? This is where all the action's at. If you want a little bit more quiet, down the side street, just single family houses. You want to be a little farther away, but still close enough. Move here, and if you really don't like people, you're off in the woods, right? So something for everyone. But what you don't see, believe it or not, all these trees and bushes, those are not buffers. That's nature and landscape design, right? So they didn't have the buffer because these places were compatible in their character. Even though they have all these different uses that are all mixed together, that are all near each other, they are compatible. And so you don't have to buffer. Sorry for the technology issue. Sure what's going on. So the other thing we do sometimes is we take it one step further with these pods. We separate pods based on how expensive what's in the pod is. Because what we realize is once our neighborhood's all sort of looking about the same, oh, what do we have to sell, right? We have the nicest cabinetry, the best countertops. We sell exclusivity, right? So if you live here in this pod, only people who can afford, $200,000 can live near you, and all of the riffraff who can afford 150,000, the people that you work with, the people who you're friends with, they can't be in your neighborhood because you've got a guard and a gate, and you will keep them out. And they're across the street here, and then here's even a lower price point, And so that's kind of what we've devolved to in our marketing strategy for real estate. And what are we doing? We're actually separating people, making people feel more isolated, and it has an impact on community. Now, what they used to do, this is how we separated price points. So this is in Georgetown, where all the senators and Congress people live, right in the DC area, some of the highest property values in the country. And so here's how it breaks down. These are apartments on this street in this building. Here are row houses here. Here are detached single family here. Here's bigger here. And then here's the really rich person on the big lot here. This is all on one block. They share an alley. You walk down the street to the corner. You've got the townhouse people meet you there. Oh, hey, how's it going? We're friends. Our kids play together. All of that stuff. Highest price points in the country, right? We didn't have to gate them and separate everybody from the next. That's how they used to do it, and you make wonderful, beloved places. Work, right? So before COVID, a lot of people spent more time at their office than they did at their house, at least a late time. And so this was your experience going to work. You went to one of those office pods, and you would go in, and you would hopefully have a window, but maybe not. And there's the parking lot, and when your lunch hour, maybe you come out and you brave the highway and go in and eat somewhere, and you have to hurry, and now you don't have your full lunch hour and rush back. Now, believe it or not, this isn't an actual photo. This is an artist's rendering. This is what somebody imagines, right? You see the theoretical pedestrian next to the 18-wheeler here, right? They're going to walk along here, probably not. But this is how the office experience used to be. People would work above, they would walk down, have a bite to eat, and then still have some extra time to sit and contemplate the meaning of life on the bench on the sidewalk, and people watch and do all those kind of things. Open space, this is another thing we hear about every place we go. We want more open space. Like, citizens have been trained, well trained, to demand more open space. So that's like the rally cry. And so we say, well, what does that mean? I don't know, just as long as it's open and green and not built. And so what you see is developments that look like this. And there is lots of green space. It looks like it's actually been painted green, but it is green space. But what we can't figure out is, where are you allowed to be? This is just left over once the engineers finished laying out the buildings, and this leftover unbuildable, sort of drainage way is your open space and met the requirement. And you go back here to throw a frisbee with your kids, and now somebody's calling the police because it's like, oh, there's a peeping Tom in the back here, and right? This is how people used to do civic space. The grand park and all the buildings face onto the park, and people lived above, and those were all parades began and ended. And no parades are happening here, that's for sure. And so open space has really changed to, from something that was important and cherished to a commodity or to meet a requirement. Streets also, infrastructure that we move around on. This is, people, streets for people here. Like, people are using this, cars can go through here too. But people feel just as comfortable as cars. Whereas here, this is, I don't know what this road is. And this, if you look at how many of these cars could fit across here, I think I counted one time, and you can get like 9 cars across. This is not a freeway. This is like a road that's connecting at some apartment complexes, it looks like. I don't know the story of this road, but it has a story, and it has a dollar sign associated with it too. That is expensive infrastructure right there, and seemingly so unnecessary, and no person would ever feel comfortable being there. So that's streets on the large scale, but then even the details of how streets are designed. So here you see the gremlin coming around the corner, and the radius of the intersection is so wide that it never actually has to hit the brakes. The driver doesn't. So the centrifugal force is leaning into the curve and goes around. And so, whereas in a more traditional pattern of development in the historic area, this guy standing here, a car nearly has to come to a stop to make this, because it's like a 10-foot radius on that intersection there. And so if this person were now transposed here and this car is flying by, he's probably not walking in that area again. That's the last time. So those little details seem minor. I love this one. This is not a commercial for red pumps. This is a woman who is traversing the stormwater strategy that has been implemented on her street. And so everything that we do moving forward as a community, every decision you make at the highest level, even down to the very details of engineering and design, all have to keep in mind what those end goals are that are contained within the comprehensive plan. The design of buildings also is important. Buildings can speak to you. These buildings say cars live here. This building says people live here, right? And it's a very different experience, but very same thing is happening. Some square feet, there's a car that parks there somewhere, but it's probably in the rear, in an alley, or drive past in the driveway, and it's in the back, it's not in the front. And so this has a very different feeling as part of the community. So cartoon version of all of this, there's a few different design principles for what we like to talk about complete communities. So they tend to be walkable. We know that the average American is willing to walk about a quarter of a mile or 5 minutes to a meaningful destination. 6 minutes, they're gonna drive. So 5 minutes, we think about that as our sort of design increment. They tend to be more compact. Not everywhere necessarily. Some areas, you have bigger lots, you have whatever, but concentrating there's the development, mix of uses, so you can get your sort of daily needs met within hopefully a reasonable walking distance of your house. For your big sort of weekly or monthly shopping trips, you're probably gonna get in your car. But if you just need a loaf of bread, you really need to get on the highway, go to the big grocery store. And then diversity, have a diversity of housing types. So you have a diversity of people of different ages, different backgrounds, experiences, etc. And so these are the sort of constituent elements of great places. Now you look at those pods, and here's the thing that is really interesting. So there's the pod version: work, shop, housing, school. For every trip you make, as I mentioned, you have to get on this collector road. Looking at a more traditional pattern of development, all the roads are interconnected, the different uses are mixed in, and you can go a multitude of ways for any of the different things you need to do within the community and never have to go to the collector road unless you want to go to the next community. And so these concepts and principles are contained within your comprehensive plan already, which is great, because most of the time we're saying this is the first time people have heard of this stuff. And so we're going to be operating under these principles. One of the things we have to figure out, though, is why we're doing this, right? It's not just for fun, it's not just a requirement, but communities have to stay relevant. You have to kind of keep up with what's going on. What's wonderful is when I have a community like this we're working in, where you have the historic core, and you see these timeless places that are still loved today, that are very, very old. And then you see places that are newer, 60s, 70s, 80s, that are not loved at all and struggling. And so, I mean, the 1980s, not 1880s. And so what's the difference? And so why do we have to worry about it? We want to make sure whatever we're doing doesn't become irrelevant and unsustainable over time. So why walk? I love this. This is we're trying to bring back neighborliness as part of that. This was for a while. This was kind of I've got my piece of the world. This is my lot. Don't even look up at my fence. But what we've seen over the past 20, 30 years is idea economy, growing, creativity, all these different focuses. We're not so focused on industrial uses necessarily, or natural resource extraction, all that. You see, these are real estate ads. So dream big, and you see here's those cul-de-sacs in the neighborhood there. This was a more recent one. Our other option was to put in more pavement. So this is a real estate ad, and there's not even any development shown. It's just wildflowers and trees. Now you're seeing things like this: live life to the max, loneliness, right? And so it's all this action and vitality and energy and excitement. And some people still want this for sure, but this is a lot of what you're starting to see. And so making sure that we're thinking about that. This is the Cool Space Locator. This is actually a real estate company that specializes in helping people find cool spaces. Now, a lot of places we work, these guys would be out of business because they have no cool spaces, right? You all have some cool spaces, but we want to make sure that development going forward still has cool spaces as well. This is actually not too old of a picture. So is it Rome?
No.
Could be. Yeah. So a lot of people love Chick-fil-A, right? Not a lot of people love sitting in this line, right? But you still do it because you love Chick-fil-A. Everybody loves this experience. You know, you show this picture and people, oh yes, that feels so good, right? I love that. Even if it's not Chick-fil-A, I'll take it. And so knowing that some of these preferences are changing, that people, while they may be tolerant enough to sit in this line, you're starting to see more and more of this experiential retail dining, all that's more about the experience and the quality of life than just getting your chicken nuggets. Here's the retail. So this was a beautiful mall with a wonderful atrium and I love these pictures. So apparently this mall went out of business and apparently the atrium somehow busted. And so this elevator, I mean, I love this. This is not a ski slope, right? They didn't just transition to a new use. This is, you know, what people, when you show them, they say, I want this. I don't want the mall. I want this, right? And all these unusual different configurations of housing too. You know, how many tiny house shows are there right now? I literally was in the grocery store last night and there's a tiny house magazine there. I bought first edition. I was like, what is this? You know? So you see people looking at tiny houses and at accessory dwelling units living above garages and micro units of these apartments that are, you know, 200-300 square feet. You know, people wanting lofts and all of these things. It's not all just about single family detached houses anymore. Which it was for a long time, because people aren't as worried necessarily about what's happening behind the front door as they are about their neighborhood and the community and their experience of being neighborly. If we have any enforcement people, then these people should probably get a ticket because they're totally blocking the sidewalk.
They are.
But you know what? And then just look at it. So, this is great. This was an old IBM ad, and they did not know how forward thinking they were. This is like the new laptop, right? This guy sitting here, and he's like, God, how do you get this thing to work? And the internet's too slow, whatever. And now this guy's running a multi-billion-dollar business off of his front porch and got wine and potato chips and his dog and his little snuggie blanket here, and hopefully it's at least afternoon. And then, you know, people want to work collaboratively in these cool spaces that I was just talking about. They want to come together and do creative things and all that. I love this picture. So this is a gym. This is a fitness place, right? And this is actually pretty new. So again, while we're talking about the sort of some of these newer old ideas and mixed use and all that, it's not that everybody wants that all the time, but this is new. It's very fancy. There's like a spa and a cafe, and you go in the gym. There's a juicer and all of these things. I can't remember what it's called, but it's fancy. You have a membership, and then you drive down the road on either side, and this is what you see. I don't care how nice they made this facade. You can't really get past the gigantic parking lot up front. Now, here's another version of the gym with a spa and all of that. This is in a mixed-use community called Vickery. You know, Vickery. And back here, with this charming little smokestack coming out of it, this is a YMCA. The YMCA is integrated into the town center. And these are mixed-use buildings here with people living above shops, and they could walk to the YMCA, and there are tons and tons, hundreds of houses in here in this interconnected way of putting these streets together, like I've been showing you, they can all walk there. And so same kind of uses, a very different experience, very different place. And so a lot of people would prefer this over the last image. And this is a really cool example. This is a new neighborhood, relatively, now it's from the 80s, relatively new, 1980s. But you could never tell if you didn't. So like, here's the big mansion. This was the old farmhouse. But all of the rest of this is new development. So there are single family detached houses. There's a garage apartment. There are row houses here. There's a park. Here's some more row houses, detached single family, stormwater solution with trails and things. Just really, really cool and unique. and it all blends together as opposed to those subdivisions that I was showing you before with the cul-de-sac. So we're going to modernize the code, the ordinance, and try to start to fold in some of these things from the comprehensive plan in a very simple way. But what we'll do to modernize it, we're going to protect the most loved parts of the city and county. So places that continue to do well, we're going to make sure that those don't get messed up with development in the future. Looking at enhancing areas that need improvement. So the comprehensive plan talks about some areas that you want to work on, see some change. We want to, through the new ordinance, create more predictable outcomes so that when you have development coming, you're not seeing people picketing and coming out before they even know what is being proposed, because odds are it's not going to be good. And so when you know what's going to come out the other end of a development, because you understand the code represents your vision for the future, you don't have to worry about it. And so we want to make those predictable outcomes. We want to think about creating something for everyone, the right place for everything. And so often when we come to a community, we'll hear people say, oh, we are a single family, 1 acre lot, single family city. Hear that so many places. Now, there are a lot of people who that is exactly what they want, but that is not everyone in any city that we've ever been to. And we were working one community where they were having this struggle, and they kept saying, we're 1 acre, 1 acre. And it was in New England. So it was a very elderly population there, because they're aging faster than, well, they're aging at the same rate per person, but, statistically they're, and so they kept saying 1 acre zoning is what we love. And I said, where did that come from? I don't know. That was just when I moved here. That's what we love it that way. And so I did a little research, and I figured out that the 1 acre zoning was determined when they were first creating the town, because that was the smallest lot you could fit septic on. And so this lifestyle that they were all protecting was based on how they deal with their waste, really, right? Mm-hmm. So that was kind of ironic. And what it meant was that when you get to the point that you can no longer, or no longer want to, take care of your 1 acre lot, cutting your grass or doing all that, in that town, because they had done a good job of protecting only 1 acre, there was nowhere for you to go. There was nowhere where you could age in place. There were no lifelong communities. There weren't even senior centers off in the strip mall. So they literally had to leave town that they may have been in their whole life. And it had never occurred to them, because they were so focused on, well, I started fighting for 1 acre zoning when I was in my 40s. Now you're in your 80s, right? And so time passes. And also, do you know that your kids and your grandkids have no interest in living in your town either? They're not coming back maybe to visit you at Christmas time. And so you have to think about outside of what your own preferences are as an individual when you're thinking long-term planning and vision. So we also want to look at how to balance all the modes of transportation. So we hear about traffic problems every place we go. And so if we can make places where people don't have to drive for everything, then that helps start to balance that. And it also tends to be more equitable, because not everybody has access to 1 car per person or 2 cars per people, or even 1 car per family. So we want to, we also think about zoning and planning as an economic development tool. So enhancing the economic viability of the area. And then we want to make it easier to use and administer the ordinance. It's a bit complicated right now based on our initial analysis. So how do we do it? We start off with what we call synoptic surveying. So we actually will be going out, this is a measuring wheel. We'll be measuring, documenting things, understanding the DNA on different parts and pieces of what makes Rome Rome. What are the places that people love, and how do we get more of that? So that's part of the process. We do zoning translation. So this is we started working on this, where we take all your existing zones and we look to see, are there ways that we can simplify them? Are they, over the years, have they gotten bloated and added on this or that didn't make sense? And the thing I always joke about is, we always hear like there's a B1 and a B2 zone. That's for bakeries, bakery 1 and bakery 2. In bakery 1, you can do bakeries that make donuts, and bakery 2, you can do bakeries that make bagels. Like they're about the same thing. You're round, kind of a hole in the bagels holes and not easy to see, but you wouldn't believe what we see, how many zoning districts. And so we try to simplify that. And then not only are we simplifying it, we also are starting to see that CD, that's character district. So now we're talking about character districts. So we translated it into character, like your comprehensive plan says. So studying all your background documents, as I said, is important. We've done an assessment of the complications and convolutedness of and some room for improvement tips for your current code. But what we know is if we try to hang on too tightly to the old version, then you end up bringing forth some of the bloat, some of the unnecessary complications. And so without completely throwing the baby out with the bathwater, we try to give you really a clean slate and a fresh perspective as we move forward. So if you are used to looking at your current zoning ordinance on a regular basis, there's going to be some getting up to speed with the new one, but it will be easier because it'll be simplified. So I mentioned that all the evils of past zoning, not just yours, but around the country, separating uses one from the next, as if we don't think about uses anymore. We do. So there will still be a use table and all that. It'll look cooler than a normal use table, but it will be there, and it will. Yeah, see what happened? It just went away. So but it goes from the most important thing to like the sixth most important thing, right? And so that's just, it'll still be there, but it'll be tied to character. So each character district across the top and what you can do in those character districts. So there will be some new things that we will be talking about. Frontages, that's sort of how the building meets the street. That's really how you experience as a pedestrian a building. So how it meets so many different frontage types that are appropriate in different character districts. So it's like the technical version and the cognitive version. And building types as well. So we'll talk about what building types are appropriate in which different character districts. We'll talk about civic space, not just random open space. When we say open space, we mean civic spaces, and it's parks, plazas, pocket parks, greenways. They have definitions and sizes and that are focused on character, right? Everything by the character of signage. That's the other thing. We see buffers or normal zoning ordinance, gigantic buffer section and gigantic signage section. For some reason, cities across the country are very, very comfortable regulating the heck out of signage. I always say, why are you so focused on the signs? Have you seen the building it's attached to? Like, what's up with that? And, well, we don't want to infringe upon what people can do with their building. Well, why with the sign? I don't get it. So anyway, so we'll have a good sign section in there, and it has in it, but what signs are appropriate in which character districts? Right? Always. So you take the revised, cleaned up, simplified, better version of the good stuff from the existing code, new character-based elements, and then you get your new code. So these are a couple of pages from one of our codes, but you see that it's also very visual. It's about making it easy to use, not just for staff, for developers, or for a regular person. Normal human being can pick it up and look at it and go like, oh, I get what this character district is all about. Here's the standards, and it shows me up here what that kind of talking about, what that kind of looks like inspirationally. So at the end of the day, we have to make sure that we are creating a code that works for everyone, something for everyone, because we know it's not all about downtown, right? It's easy to focus on downtown, it's exciting, it's cool, but there's also rural areas, hinterlands, and all of that. So it's not going to be just focused on that in the core. But that said, we know based on what the comprehensive plan says, and just in general, our experience around the country, that most people outside of the urbanized areas within the county, or even that aren't urbanized in the city, aren't necessarily looking to have the fields turned into massive development. Like a rural character maintained is easy to explain, right? So I don't have to spend a lot of time talking about like keeping the rural character. You know what that means. So if you don't hear us focus on it, it's not because we're not focused on it. It's just not something we have to, because the little time we have with all of you, we have to focus on the things that are like new or understanding some of the essence of things. We'll talk about rural, but it just won't be as much. So also something that works for the policymakers so that everybody can get behind it and their constituents are into it, and that it's something that, you know, they're not going to get run out of town for because, you know, they want it to work. Something for the community, something for businesses, people of all ages. This is one I go to a lot too. And visitors. You're lucky enough to be a place where you actually get visitors. Some places we work, they're like, can you help us get a visitor? You have them, and so now we want to capitalize on them and want to extract their resources and funds when they come to town and then send them away because we don't have to provide services for them, right? But it's great to have, and also for the developers, right? So often developers just have a bad rap. People down, oh, they're making money, they're being greedy, they're trying to. It's like it's just a job. And everybody who goes to work is trying to make money, right? So don't begrudge the developer for that. Now, the developer has an outsized opportunity to screw up your city beyond what you can in a normal job because they build the things, but they can also make them great. Because the parts of the city that you love were also built by people who were trying to make money. They weren't just built by the city, right? So all working together, singing from the same sheet of music, developers can do things that you love. But most importantly, because we work all over the country, we have to make sure that we don't just import random things that aren't of this place. And we count on the community and all of you to hold us accountable to make sure that this document represents the essence of Rome-Floyd County. It's the most important thing. So timeline and next steps. We are at the beginning of the Planapalooza. Finally, it's here, and we will have a bunch of fun things that are happening throughout. We have different meetings coming up, different discussion topics on neighborhoods and housing on Saturday at 1, architecture and design, Saturday at 2:30, downtown Rome. It's a special meeting. There's a special place. Saturday at 4, streets and connectivity Monday at 10, land use and development Monday at 11:30. The thing to know is when people are asking you about it, it's open to anyone. Anyone who cares about any of these topics can come. We will have people from different departments in the city and county that are there that are the experts on the technical side of things, and so we'll be learning from them. But people don't have to have any specific knowledge or credentials to come to these meetings. So they will just show up to learn, to listen, and share ideas as well. We have all of the things that we're doing this week online as well, so if people can't come, they can participate online, and these meetings will be broadcast online, like this meeting is tonight as well, so people can watch live or watch the recording at a later time. So here we are. So this is in the timeline where we are. After we go through this week, we will refine some of the data, things we've learned about here, and things that we started learning about but realized we need to know more about. We'll also start drafting the first draft. We'll create a client draft that goes to the planning department to just take a quick look at and make sure we haven't done anything crazy or like forgotten anything that we all talked about. But it's not intended to be something that's really tinkered with, because we want the process to be as community driven as possible. And so that draft, we get their comments, we fix anything that we goofed up on, and send out a public draft and have an open house process. Final draft will be underway, and then we'll present that final draft, and then we'll go through the adoption process. So for a few minutes before we start our mapping exercise, I've done a lot of talking here, catch my breath, and we'll pause and see if you all have any questions, comments, or anything. Yes?
Are these character districts will have similar transit zones?
Yes, they are, for all the planning nerds in the room. Yes. Yes. Good. Yeah, so just in a nutshell, so the idea is that the transect is a planning concept where there's a continuum of different characters from the most rural to the most urban. And so you know where your most urban is and you know where your most rural is. Now, I'm actually glad you mentioned that, because I probably should have focused on that in the presentation, but I had some slides and I didn't want to bore you. But because we have county and city in the same ordinance and same discussion and same all of the things you do together wonderfully, you may go like, oh, well, how do you write one thing that's simple and accomplishes all the things for each of these areas? Well, a lot of places we work don't do the county city thing that you do, but they have rural and they have urban. And so if we take off the imaginary lines on the map that are not, don't mean anything to us as outsiders, but are very obvious to all of you as locals, what we find is just the continuum of character. And so all of the same rules, regulations, and all that can apply. It just depends on which of these different character areas you're in. And so we just need to make sure that we're writing zoning districts that are reflective of, forget if county or city, urban, rural, and everything in between. And so that's the transit. So, but we find when we say transit sometimes.
Yeah.
So character zones. So, anything else? Any other questions, thoughts, concerns?
One of the things I noticed is that in all your good examples, you had multiple uses, but the size, scale, and placement of the building was the same. One of the things we see a lot of is somebody will bring us and say, I found the plan for this building online, make it fit on this parcel.
Yeah.
And that's not development. I mean, so it's great, but you might have to hire, a designer of some sort. And this idea that we're just gonna go find the building on the internet, some generic whatever building, and we're gonna stick it here, and if it doesn't fit, well, that just means I need a variance. That's not true. You didn't design the building to fit the lot.
Yeah.
You just tried to squeeze it in there.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, and I'm glad not everybody sees it that way, because otherwise half of our business would go away. And what I always tell people is like, this whole Planapalooza thing, we actually do this same thing for our private development projects, right? Bringing in the community before we put pen to paper. And we say, hey, what is everybody thinking? Like, we know, like, yeah, our client controls the land and they have things they want to do with it and all of that stuff, but if you had your druthers, like, how could this development improve your life, right? And we actually get good ideas. Now, some places we work, they say, well, we want it to be a park. And we say, okay, no problem. Just go talk to the city about that and see if people want to buy it. No problem. It's for sale. But yeah, it can't be. You're not going to get a masterpiece that would hang in the Louvre if you're doing a paint by number, right?
Sure.
So, yes.
Speaking of them, it's probably too early in the process to even consider this, but how do you think we can handle area and use variances for this whole new? Is it something you're going to draft within the new code for us, or it's just probably sort of on a fellow?
Yeah, I mean, you may have an idea.
Because we currently have only area variances in our current code, not only use variances, so.
Most places think that use variances constitute a rezoning.
Okay.
Because that's what you're doing, is complying with the zoning. And so there in most states, I haven't seen in Georgia, but most states won't allow you to do a use variance. So variances for things like setbacks and that kind of stuff is.
I've got the zoning in the legislature if you want it.
No, I've read it, but thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
so, because I was wondering if you would ever be able to work that in without doing a complete rezoning of the room, this character of the scale of the surrounding area.
I mean, we can look at it closer, but I don't think it's probably the direction. That said, what we're going to end up with is a much broader array of uses in each zone. So you don't have just, here's your, 2,000 square foot retail store. That's the only thing you put there. There's a lot of things that can go there, so you don't really need the use variance. It's idea.
I think our issue here was so many special uses. Is our original code went off the Nexus codes, the business codes, and that just kind of ruined it from the beginning. So
She's right.
Well, when you look at the historic maps of the city, and you look at the growth and progression, especially those old Sanborn fire insurance maps, and they tell you, the use of every, not just the main building, but the back building and what materials, all is incredibly detailed. And you look at them from year over year over year, and it changes and it changes and it changes. And developers developed buildings and spaces, and what went in them was irrelevant to the building, right? So they would retrofit something. If now it's like, so we need ventilation for a restaurant, we add the ventilation to it. The restaurant goes away, you don't need the ventilation, and now it's a boutique, it's a whatever. And so if you think about development in that way and start moving away from the fixation on use, not only do you don't need buffering, but you also don't need those kind of variances. Now, it's all within limits, right? So you may still have a desire to have new neighborhoods that are predominantly single family, but what we're seeing is nationally a real move towards requiring at least mixed housing types. So you might have mostly single family, but you also have to have some townhouse, some duplex, whatever, maybe even some small multifamily, like 6, 8-plex, like the old apartment houses like we see in cool little neighborhoods now. And maybe even in areas where it's commercially viable, you might have a little neighborhood center. So that's something that we're seeing a lot. And you don't have to be so afraid of the different uses at that point when you have that range.
I have a question from online.
All right.
Brian, I did not hear any comments about climate change. Everything we do in the future must consider actions that impact with climate change. Are you going to consider and include ways we can mitigate climate change in your planning strategies?
Yes, so insofar as that the comprehensive plan does, right? So since we're really following the direction of the comprehensive plan, but I will say that even though I wasn't explicit about it, there are many of the things that I talked about here that are related to it. So for instance, if we're creating a zoning ordinance that the end result is a more walkable place, also meaning now you're driving less, right? So there are environmental and sustainability benefits from that. One of the things that we found over the years is many cities that we come to, because we work in places that are, like we did the zoning in Burlington, Vermont, and they are super green, like world X. They have like 6 or 7 colleges and universities in the city of Burlington. And you have like the top experts on sustainability in the world who are professors there. So they're like, our Planet Palooza, they were like all over it, right? And so we want all this and everything has to be green. And so, great, no problem. So we add these things in the zoning ordinance. And as soon as it now gets put on paper and is now a requirement, then all of a sudden everyone's looking like, oh, wow, that's tough. That's a lot of stuff. And we all really love that. But we now realize too, that if we require this, and this, it's going to add X amount of cost to every new building or whatever. And we don't want to stifle development. Now, that said, not everything you do that is sustainable or is green has to add cost, right? So we want to think about what are the things that we can do that are sustainable, that don't have additional costs. So one of the things that we love looking at the most is sustainable stormwater practices, because it's with less pipes and less underground, it costs less. The infrastructure itself costs less. Now there's some maintenance that you have to do over time, but all things have maintenance. And so in addition to costing less, it can also be beautiful. It can become part of the vision and the image of your city and that character. And so thinking through like how far you all as a community are comfortable going with sustainability and all of that included in the ordinance will be part of the process. But in nearly every place we've gone, you end up going from you shall do, because the zoning ordinance is a directive, right? It's like you don't kind of, it's not like a kind of sort of maybe we hope you will, please. Like that doesn't go in zoning. Zoning is law, right? And so every single time we include these standards, it goes from a very directive, here's what you have to do. These are the requirements for new development to be sustainable. And then through various mechanisms, processes, pushback, et cetera, it all starts going to light kind of sort of with, hopefully, and then it comes out because you don't have that kind of language. So it's something to think about. It's something that's important. We hope that a lot of the common sense things that we do in this approach, this timeless approach, will resonate and bring those ideas forward. But it probably won't be a super explicit part of the discussion of zoning, but we will talk about it. So for whomever said that, please participate in some of these technical meetings and bring it up in the specifics when we talk about the different areas. Anybody else? All right, mapping exercise. So this will be fun. You're going to be planners for the night. So I guess some of you are planners every day, but those of you who aren't, will be planners for the night. All right, so what we're going to do is on the table before you, there are instructions. So I'll go through it quickly, but you have it on the table and you can read it. So you have the map. And if you live in the areas that are underneath pictures and things, please don't be offended. That was, we put stuff on here knowing that those areas were more rural and more green, and that thing that I said earlier about probably wanting to stay rural, follows. So what you'll see is a word bank at the bottom, with words that are descriptive of character or various things. Circle the word and draw a line to where the different areas you think that that word would be appropriate. And then similarly, the photographs along here, they're all different kinds of character. Where you might see some of the ones that you like. You don't have to, every picture and every word doesn't have to get a line or a circle or whatever. So you can like not like some of them too. It's okay. That tells us something. But and so it's like when you're a kid, you know, you had these worksheets in school, like with the word bank. So draw the line, circle it, and you know, write notes, write thoughts. Just really, you know, get down your ideas on here. And this helps us as we start to take some of those higher level concepts or in the comprehensive plan and start thinking about what it means to all the community. So we have 20 minutes to do it. And at the end of those 20 minutes, each group is going to talk through a little bit, some of their ideas and things that they've been inspired.
So the concept isn't to identify what, this isn't like match game.
No.
This is already there.
This is visioning. This is looking to the future. And so what you see here, this is the map from the comprehensive plan with these different character areas. That's what the different colors are on that map. So again, using the comp plan as the given. And so, but really trying to understand, like some of those purple areas are different than each other, right? And some of those salmon color areas are different, even though they're the same color. And so we want to understand what's most appropriate in each of those areas as we think about these character districts. So, but it's supposed to be fun. Like, don't put too much pressure on yourself. There's no wrong answers. We're not going to grade you or anything like that. So 20 minutes, we'll reconvene and go through together.